Understanding the phosphorus cycle. The Earth's crust contains about 0.13% phosphorus by mass, making it the 11th most abundant element in the crust. Unprocessed phosphate rock has a concentration of 1.7 to 8.7% phosphorus by mass. Phosphorus is a plant's nutrient that typically makes up about 0.1 to 1% of the plant's tissue, or 0.05 to 0.5 of its total dry weight. Phosphorus is one of the most important minerals in animal nutrition, second only to calcium. A fun fact about phosphorus: did you know that plants cannot use organic forms of phosphorus? It's true. Phosphorus is never found on Earth in its pure form because of how reactive it is. Instead, it's found as phosphate, PO43 negative, a non-organic molecule. In chemistry, organic molecules must contain carbon. The form that plants use is known as orthophosphates, H2PO4 negative, or H2PO42 negative. Both are non-organic. In pH lower than 7, neutral, see my video about the pH scale, H2PO4 negative is predominant. This is the range that we generally grow our plants in. Phosphorus is used to build organic molecules such as DNA and RNA. What do plants use phosphorus for? Phosphorus helps convert the sun energy into useful plant compounds. It binds together RNA and DNA molecules. This is the DNA molecule, and everywhere where it attaches to the next helix, it is bound together using phosphorus. It stimulates root growth, increases stalk and stem strength, improves flower formation and seed production. This is why when we are growing our tomatoes and stuff, when it's time to start fruiting our plants, and we need a little more phosphorus in the ground as opposed to nitrogen. It also increases resistance to plant disease and much more. Animals use it to build bones and teeth. It is required for our healthy muscles. Again, it binds together our DNA and our RNA molecules. It's essential for our metabolism, growth, maintenance, and repair of all tissues and cells, and much more. How long is the phosphorus cycle? The earliest species, Homo genus, appeared around 2 million to 1.5 million years BCE. Current evidence supports that us, modern Homo sapiens, appeared about 190,000 years ago, BCE. The phosphorus cycle is a very slow process that takes over 1 million years to complete. The average phosphate ion spends 20,000 to 100,000 years in the ocean, where it settles into sedimentary rock. Eventually, geological forces lift that phosphate-containing rock from the ocean's floor onto the land, completing the cycle. This cycle is longer than all of human history. Phosphorus is a major limiting factor to a land's productivity. Let's go over the natural phosphorus cycle. Wind and rain erodes rocks containing phosphate. Some of that is blown onto the land as dust. The rest of it runs off into our waterways. Some of that will get deposited onto the land during floods. This might be one of the reasons why Egyptians used to farm so close to the waterways and rely on flooding, because the phosphorus was needed in the land. Plants take up the phosphorus into their roots. Animals eat these plants. Other animals eat those animals, moving the phosphorus up the food chain. Eventually everything dies, and decomposers break that down. The poop, the animals, the dead plants, break it down into the soil again, where plants take it back up, and it starts a little mini cycle right here. Some of that will run off into the rivers during during rain. The phosphorus that ends up in our waterways and out to the ocean gets used by aquatic plants. Those get eaten by different things, and phosphorus moves up the food chain, where things again die off, get decomposed and recirculated. Some of that will end up at some of the soil containing phosphorus. The dead animals and plants will eventually settle to the bottom, where they get compressed into sedimentary rock. Over millions of years, those layers develop, and eventually geologic forces that up onto land again, creating new mountains, new rockways, and the cycle is completed. This is the natural, non-human involved phosphorus cycle. Like I said earlier, humans discovered a long time ago that one of the limiting factors of land is the amount of phosphorus in that land. So we started mining rock containing phosphorus. It gets processed in two ways. The wet process, where phosphate is treated with sulfuric acid and is produced phosphoric acid. The other way is a thermal process that is very energy intensive, but does reduce phosphate into pure white phosphorus. This is the only way that pure phosphorus occurs on Earth. Once it's processed, we use it to make fertilizers. It's used in animal feed, detergents, and much, much more. Let's take a look at the human activity for phosphorus. We mine it. It gets processed like I just talked about. Gets turned into fertilizers. Those fertilizers get spread onto the land. Again, the roots of the plants will take it up. It is harvested. Because we are taking the harvest off of the land, we'll eventually need to add more fertilizer to it. Of course, the food gets processed and moved up the food chain. I didn't show it here, but some of this stuff will die off, and eventually the little mini cycle will start, where decomposers and stuff. But what happens here is sometimes we'll use too much fertilizer, and the rain will come along and it'll wash it off into the waterways. We get too much phosphorus in the waterways, and we get excessive blooms of algae and aquatic plants. Those aquatic, in a process called eutrophication. Algae blooms use up all the oxygen, and aquatic plants and animals start to die. Decomposers come in and use up even more of the oxygen, creating anaerobic conditions, sometimes causing a total collapse of the ecosystem. Eventually, just like in the natural cycle, all this stuff will settle to the bottom of the oceans, where it does get compressed into sedimentary rock, and someday will be pushed back up as phosphate containing rocks, as new mountains, and the phosphorus cycle will start over again. In closing, Phosphorus is often the limiting factor in land's productivity. The phosphorus cycle is very, very slow. Human farming practices can cause harm to our waterways and oceans. Farming and gardening will deplete the amount of available phosphorus because of how slow the phosphorus cycle is. Humans and our plants and animals must eat. There's no doubt about it. The use of fertilizers is often needed on farmland where enough compost just isn't available. We should all try to limit the amount of fertilizers and only use what's needed to minimize the amount of runoff into our waterways. If you get something out of this video, like, share, and subscribe, and have a fantastic season.